heater running, it's drying out my eyeballs. Yeah, it's December here in Tacoma. There's snow outside, and I'm up in a heated but not insulated attic, so it's not real toasty up here sometimes. Oh yeah, okay, so we change cam locks on stub wing, access panels. Stub wings on the H-46 are where the fuel tanks are, and they're also used for a small storage compartment, so the access panels are to the little back part where you can store things. Sometimes they put aircraft covers in there. The aircraft battery was in the port side one. The starboard one usually was empty, so you could throw things in there like access panels or whatever. Access aircraft covers. Yeah, one of those days. Stub wings were funny in a way because it didn't matter what we did. You'd come back after a flight in the rain, or if you washed the aircraft down, you'd have 4 or 5 inches of water sitting there in the stub wings in the back. And there was drains in there, and it was like aircraft designers probably are stoned or something like that, because none of the drains were at the low point. And so I don't know what they thought they were going to accomplish by even putting drains in there. If they were, you know, it's like, even if the drain worked, you'd still leave an inch of water in there, so that's kind of like, what's the point? But there's a side story. I should type that in. Make a note of that. Come back later. I actually took my own personal shop vac with me on the cruise, and we used it for getting the water out of all the access panels on the aircraft. It worked really well, and I'd be interested now to find out if the Navy started buying shop vacs to send out on there, because I showed it to a few of our officers, and I'm like, you know, this is mandatory. You guys just have to get one of these, because normally what would happen is the plane captains would walk around with like a great big sponge like you'd use for washing your car, and they'd sit there and with the sponge and soak up as much water as they could, and they'd wring it out and stick it in, and, you know, wring it out and stick it in. And I'm like, I'm watching that, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way this is going to work, you know. So we were in the Philippines one time during monsoon season, and before we could get the panel closed, they were filling up with water. It was that fast, you know. So that, you know, the air crew would look in there, and there's 4 inches of water, and they'd look at it, and they'd look at us, and they'd look back in there, and then we'd close it up, and they'd go flying around with all that water in the stub wings, because we couldn't get it out faster, because it was all running off the aircraft down into the holes. And we always wondered what the effect of all that water was, because it had to add a, you know, considerable amount of weight. But anyway, so let's see, we secured about 2200. Oh yeah, for anybody that doesn't know military time, well, 0 through 12 is the same, and 1300 is 1 p.m. and you just keep adding hours up there, so 2200 would be 10 o'clock p.m. And I'm sure there's a reason for that, but secured about 2200, got to bed at 2330. That difference from secured to getting to bed, that's typically when I actually wrote these posts, was, you know, I'd sit there and type up a little bit, and if I had an email, that's when I got to read it. And, you know, we'd sometimes just sit up in the crew area where we had the hangar deck was on the same level as the flight deck, and then we'd go up one flight of stairs, and then we had a little office space where we all got to hang out. There was a TV up there, which actually it was my TV now that I think about it, because at this point I was single, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me to leave my TV in the barracks, because it would just sit there for however long we were going to be gone. And so we actually had a little bit of space to work with, and so I brought my computer, I brought my TV, and I think I brought my VCR then also. And so when people sent us movies, we would watch them on my TV. And then the ship also had its own little cable system where up in the library or someplace, you know, once or twice a night, one of the ship crew would go pick a movie out and stick it in the VCR up there, and it would go through the whole system, and so anybody that had a TV could plug into that and watch, you know, whatever movie they had. Well, it got to be a joke after a while because, you know, we only had about a month and a half worth of movies, and, you know, so we kept seeing the same movie over and over again until somebody finally, you know, would mail us a tape, and so we would watch, you know, our own tapes, and then some of the tapes we actually gave to the ship just so they could show them to everybody else, and we kind of shared that way. But okay, so I got to bed about 23:30. Need to be up by 0600 muster. I don't know if muster makes sense or not to anybody either, but muster is just when we all showed up at job, and, you know, we were mustered. It was an active where whoever had the list would be, you know, you just check off everybody's names, and so that was you were mustered that you were there. I guess that's probably a common word, I don't know. You don't hear it everywhere else, you know, everybody else just checks into work or something, but so we would actually muster. Usually what happened is we'd get there and muster by 600. We would get the first aircraft pushed out on the flight deck, and we had a little bit of time before we actually launched, and so then we'd run upstairs really quick, get something to eat, and then get back down by the time they got ready to start the aircraft, and then from there it was time to go hit the beach, and which, you know, or whatever we were doing that day, but we usually had a little gap, and so we'd all run up really quick and, you know, get some food and eat it as quick as we could. And, I remember when I was a kid, I used to always take my time eating, and my dad would tease me about, you know, it's like, you know, it's almost dinner time and you're still working on lunch or something like that. And then I hit boot camp, and it was just very, very abrupt for me because you had like 5 minutes to eat your dinner, and then you had to be back outside because, you know, there's so many people all trying to eat, and so you bring 80 people in at a time, our whole company, and they would start the stopwatch when the first person went through the line, and officially we had 15 minutes. Well, by the time 80 people get through the line, the guy on the end doesn't have very much time because you got to be back outside before, you know, and they actually would sort of time you. And, you know, there was times where, you know, they'd chase us out because we'd sat there too long. And I was one of the taller guys, and so I probably had a little bit of an advantage there, but it's, you know, only 7 or 8 minutes to eat, and, you know, I was used to taking my time, and so it just got to be a big scarf fest, you know, where you're just chowing down. And I remember my company commander one day where he was feeling generous and sharing life experiences with us instead of yelling at us. Navy company commander is like a drill instructor for the rest of the military. He was talking about something, and he was a single guy, and he said that quite often he would go out on a date with somebody, and, you know, they'd sit down at a nice restaurant, and the food would come, and you know, they're trying to make conversation while he's already finished eating, and she's still picking at her salad because he was so conditioned to eating fast and leaving that now he wasn't able to stop and enjoy a dinner anymore. And he said it made for very awkward dates because now he's watching her eat, and he's ready to jump up and go somewhere, and, you know, he had nowhere to go, but it was kind of like, oh, they're just so conditioned to not sitting there. It's kind of weird. And now as I'm typing this, I've been out of the Navy. It's been over 20 years since boot camp, and I still find myself, if I have a sandwich, I'll eat it so fast I don't realize I finished it, and I'm trying to figure out where I put it down, and then I'm like, I guess I finished it already. And, you know, I haven't needed to do that for years, but I'm so conditioned to it. Kind of strange, but anyway, I wonder who's going to watch this anyway. Alright, well, that's kind of basically about it. That'll be a good start for now. We'll wrap that one up, and I'll talk to you soon.